Look, I'm not ashamed. This is maybe just one of those videos I hope my grandmother doesn't find, you know? Hi, I'm Caitlin and welcome to the Lit Review. Today we're doing a follow-up video for one I posted way back in March where I introduced a hopefully new series, and this is kind of like part 2 or follow-up to that series, and I'm still kind of ruminating on a name for it. I did have a subscriber recommendation from Storm of Books and Pages. They suggested the recommendation roundtable, so I like that option. Please let me know what you think about calling this series the recommendation roundtable, but maybe I should back up and explain what the heck this series is. My original concept for this series was about finding the niche moments of a subgenre. So for the example I use is we all know the trope age gap romance if you're in the community. So an example of what I mean by niche is instead of just age gap romance, you could do ex's father, best friend's father, you could do best friend's sibling. Romance as a genre I feel like is always expanding, always continuing to push boundaries, and so this series is my way of continuing to explore a genre that I love and learning from content creators and from you all, you know, what's good, what's interesting right now. So how I started this series off was I reached out on Instagram to one of my favorite content creators, to Stephanie at virgoreader. That's her handle on both Instagram and TikTok. I'll link her below. I reached out and kind of gave her that pitch of like, hey, I'm looking to explore the genre from some of my favorite creators. Like, what is your like niche trope? And I gave her the age gap example. And so what she came back with, brainstorming wise, was, quote, an unrealistic size difference between a human and a monster, which I translated into basically monster size kink. And that's what I've been reading a lot of, interspersed throughout other reading for the last handful of months. So she gave me 3 recommendations, and in that original video I posted, I asked you all for some more recommendations. I got several. I will be blunt, I did not read everybody's recommendations. I apologize, but you all gave me some good stuff and they're still on my list. So today's video is really a follow-up to that now that I've read a bunch of them, and I'm going to kind of rank them for you. Now, I want to be clear on this, like when I'm ranking these, this is based on my personal preference, my personal interpretation of how much I enjoy or do not enjoy different aspects of this niche subgenre. So if I have hated on something you love, or just like loved up on something you think is like ew, that's okay. This is really about me figuring my stuff out and hopefully getting you some good recommendations along the way. I know a lot of people use like that tier ranker, tier maker thing, but I'm gonna be honest, when it asked for, it will only make a template for me if I allow it basically carte blanche of my Twitter account, and I'm not willing to do that. So I'm gonna kind of just make my own tier ranking infographic as we go. I should also tell you about the tiers that I've created. So the absolute best of the best, the stuff that I think is just mwah, beautiful, love it, amazing, I am calling genre defining smut. Because that's really what it is. It's like next level. I would highly recommend this based on my personal preferences. The next level down, I'm just gonna say it's the good stuff. It's, you know, like I enjoyed it, I liked it, it maybe took me by surprise a little bit. That middle tier that's like good but not great, I was entertained. Because sometimes you're just entertained by like the absolute wackiness of a premise. I was entertained, like I had a good time, I didn't hate it. And then I have forgettable as kind of like the 4th place of the 5, where it's like, oh yeah, it was okay. I'm not in love, I'm not sold, but you know, forgettable. The bottom tier is just gonna be labeled not my kink, because I'm not here to kink shame or judge anybody for stuff that they think is really great, but there are just some things that are just not gonna be for me. So first I should probably tackle the 3 books that Stephanie suggested to me in that original video and tell you how I felt about them. So the first thing she recommended was Barbarian Seduction by Dixon. And this I want to say is like deep into the Ice Planet Barbarian series. So she also said in her note, like, feel free to start with the first couple to get a sense of the world, but like Barbarian Seduction is where it's at. I tend to agree with her. So I did read the first 2 books in the Ice Planet Barbarian series for this video as well, just because I did want to get a lay of the land and they were kind of compelling. I did go back and then find Barbarian Seduction, and I rated it the highest of the 3 books I've read in that series thus far. I rated Barbarian Seduction 4 stars, and I think I would put this in the category of the good stuff. I had a nice time. I thought there was really good world building. I like that our heroine in Barbarian Seduction was French, and so had like sometimes additional trouble communicating. And the really sweet moments between her and her partner where he is trying to learn her language or utilizes her language. While I'm here, I might as well tell you about the other 2 Ice Planet Barbarian novels I read for this. So I read the first 2. I read, well, Ice Planet Barbarian by Ruby Dixon. I gave that 3 stars. I love Georgie as a character. I think she's great. I do think this for me falls into the I was entertained category because it was fun. I had a nice time, but it didn't rock my world. It didn't change my perspective on the genre or like make me think, oh, this is my new favorite thing. I also read Barbarian Alien, which is book 2 in the Ice Planet Barbarian series by Ruby Dixon, and I also gave that 3 stars. I actually think I liked it a little less than the first one, even though they're both 3-star reads for me. I honestly kind of would put it in forgettable. I actually think I didn't like the heroine. Like, it really frustrated me how she kept calling their like soul thing a cootie. And I just was like, wow, you're really immature, and I don't think I like want to care about your story. And literally when I think about that book, that is the only detail that I remember. I don't remember the heroine's name. I don't remember her partner's name. I remember that she kept calling his quee a cootie, and it bugged me. So forgettable. And Stephanie recommended, the other book Stephanie recommended was The Duchess and the Orc by Finley Fenn. And this is another whole series, but she said that was her favorite of the series. I got like maybe 30% in, and I DNF'd it. So for me, it's just gonna go into not my kink. And specifically, I feel like it deserves not my kink because it wasn't the like niche that we're exploring of like monster size difference. It was one of the other things that sometimes happens within this subgenre that was just a no good for me, and I'm learning that about myself. As delicately as I can put this, I really can't stand what I'll just leave as like belly inflation. I find that really uncomfortable to read about. So if you're unfamiliar, it's literally when I can't believe I'm talking about this on the internet. Oh no, I will leave it at belly inflation, and I'm going to be kind of gentle about my language there, but it's when they have had such an intense time that the woman's belly is a little full and there's a bulge from how much of a good time her male partner had. So not my kink, definitively. And then the last one that Stephanie recommended was Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nascosta. I loved this. This one was great. This is the only one I had read ahead of time from her recommendation. I gave it 4 stars and would put it in the good stuff category. I think it was really fun, really delightful. So I would put that in the good stuff because I had a really good time with it. I think it is going to stand out in my mind as like what good looks like in this subgenre, but it didn't just like grab me with my whole heart, you know what I mean? While I'm on the topic of C.M. Nascosta though, I did enjoy Morning Glory Milking Farm sufficiently to go down a bit of a rabbit hole with her. So I read the kind of like prequel or companion to that. It's got like 3 different lead perspectives called Girls Weekend. And I gave that 3 stars. And I think that goes in I was entertained because I had a good time with it. I kind of wish personally that I could focus on like just one person's story instead of the 3 female characters, but I had a good time. And then I know there's a follow-up to that one that I have not read yet. I'll put the cover up here just because I'm blanking on the title. But the one that I have read and read recently was, I think, her most recent release, Sweet Berries by C.M. Nascosta. And that is where our heroine falls in love with a Mothman. It has like some elements of voyeurism. It was like really steamy, really spicy. I gave it 3 stars and I would again put it in I was entertained. It was just a good time. If you're looking to get into like monster romances, I would actually recommend C.M. Nascosta because the way she writes her world, it deals like with what perceived prejudice against humans and monsters would probably be like, but she's writing a world where they are coexisting and it's totally okay for her human characters to feel attraction and lust for these often not quite human looking beings. So I think that's like a good kind of dip your toe in the water world because it's not dark. If you're curious about monster romances or monster size difference romances, I would recommend trying some of CM Nascosta. Another good dipping your toe in the waters that I read for this video was a book from the Immortals After Dark series by Kresley Cole. And the specific book I read from the Immortals After Dark series was Demon from the Dark. I highly recommend that entire series, but not all of them feature size difference to quite this degree because one of our big characters here is a Veman or vampire demon, and he's literally huge. I know the romance community kind of gets a little shade thrown at it now and again for having like giant, thick dude characters as like the only approachable body type, but our heroine is a Valkyrie and she's even like, wow, I don't know how this is going to work. Which I think is the hallmark of this niche subgenre is I don't know if this is going to work, but it does, and it's a good time. So that again is another one that I would recommend dipping your toe in the water because that whole series is fantastic. It's like medium spicy. I love that whole series. I gave Demon from the Dark 4 stars, and I put it in the good stuff. That is just, it's the good stuff. It's just a really great series, and I reread it every now and again because it's amazing. Then I read a novella that I stumbled upon on KU as I was just searching, because once the algorithm starts to figure out what you're up to, it's like, hey, weirdo, you want to try one of these? So I found Prey by an author called Cari Silverwood. I had never read any of their work before. I finished it. Was not necessarily a fan, so I will say that this is not my kink, specifically because this was a very dark version of the monster size difference, and she owns that. Like in her author's note, she even says like this is one of the lighter romances I've ever written because it kind of has an HEA, but for me the HEA was actually pretty grim. The smut like genuinely sounded painful, like so for me that was just not my kink, but I did read it. I can tell you right now, this is going to be the first genre-defining smut, and that is A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by Kathryn Moon. Now, when Stephanie recommended this like prompt to me, this was one of the first books I thought of. I had read it before she had given me that prompt. Kaylani from Kaylani Simply Me also commented on my original video being like, oh girl, you have to read this. And I was like, yes, I know, I will reread it because I love it. 4.5 stars from me. Genre-defining smut. Genre-defining. Like, I'm obsessed with Kathryn Moon now as an author. I would also, if you want to get to like the super smutty side of this subgenre of romance, highly recommend Lady of Rooksgrave Manor. Compared to another book in the series, the men that she is falling in love with are like more humanoid monsters, and so I think that is probably going to be if you're looking for high-level smut but want to still ease into the genre, this is another space I would recommend trying out. Lady of Rooksgrave Manor is what I'll be calling moving forward on this channel a why choose novel instead of a reverse harem. Specifically calling this out now because I think we commonly refer to things as reverse harem, but I've been seeing a lot of content creators on TikTok in particular saying like, hey, that's very uncomfortable to hear because this has a lot of cultural connotations and it's being applied in a way that makes people uncomfortable. So I'm going to be calling it why choose, because that's really what's going on, is that the lady doesn't have to choose. She can have as many as she wants. And in this case, I think she has 6. 5, 6. Kathryn Moon then released this year A Company of Fiends, which is like book 2 in that series. And I loved it. It, I think, is also at like 4 stars for me. Unlike Esther in A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, the main character of A Company of Fiends, Hazel, is definitely engaging in multiple relationships with the majority of her menfolk could not pass as human. More monstrous is, I guess, the way to do it. Like, she has a relationship with an imp and an orc and a Greek giant that has a specific name that I will not try to pronounce because I know I can't do it. But I still freaking love this series. I do like A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor a bit more personally because I just like, it hit different. Company of Fiends gets to be in the good stuff category because it is very good, but it is not like as life-changing for me as A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor is, and that's where I'm going to draw the line. Then I read The Dragon's Bride by Katee Robert. This is the first in a new series that she's got going on that is kind of leaning into this monster size difference subgenre, and I enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I gave it 3 stars, and I will be putting it in I was entertained. I don't think it's one of my favorite of Katee Roberts' books at all, but I had a really good time. 3 stars to me is still a good rating. I was entertained, but it is, as you can tell by the cover, it is a romance between a human woman and a literal dragon, but more of like a man-sized dragon. I learned some new terms during the exploration of the genre. So like specifically, I learned a new kink phrase called primal play, and that is basically when both parties enjoy the chase and chasing, and that comes up in a couple of books. Specifically, it comes up in The Dragon's Bride, and I didn't think I was gonna like that, but it was good stuff. It was good times. So yeah, I was entertained. Then I read Deceived by the Gargoyle by Lillian Lark, and I had a good time with this one too. I gave it 3 stars, and I would like to read more Lillian Lark. I would try more of her books for sure. I'm gonna give this one, even though it's 3 stars, I feel like I want to give this one the good stuff because I really like connected with the characters. I liked the world building a lot more than in some of the other ones. So I'm gonna boost it a little bit. But listen, if you're a child of a certain era, you remember the animated TV series The Gargoyles, and Goliath had an effect on a lot of us who are now obsessed with Sarah J. Maas. Let's just put it that way. And Lillian Lark, in the author's notes, called out that she specifically wrote that book thinking of some of the characters from that series. And the entire time, I felt so freaking validated, because the entire time I was like, I can't stop picturing the Gargoyles from this animated series. What is wrong with me? No, I was on point. And while it's the only one I read for this series, Lillian Lark has a bunch of different books that fit in this monster size difference or monster romance category. So check that author out if you're intrigued and would like to know more. Then I ran into another one that just, you know, kind of set me on my heels a little bit, and that was Little Slice of Hell by Clio Evans. I gave this one 2.5 stars. It's gonna go in the not my kink category, specifically because I think it pushed my boundaries of the level of pain that I'm willing to endure or entertain in my romances. Like, I like a little bit of a BDSM romance now and again. This was like a little too far, but it does follow a human and a succubus, and they go, like, the whole premise of this series by Clio Evans is that you can like go to this man known as the barista, and he will hook you up, like literally hook you up with a supernatural, a paranormal creature. This was an MM romance. It did deal with a lot of like personal trauma and healing, and it was very insta-love, insta-lust, like you're mine forever kind of vibes. So there were parts of it that I did kind of like, because some of those tropes work for me. But the level of pain was not my bag, so we're gonna put that in not my kink. And then last but certainly not least, this is a book that I think its sequel either comes out later this year or early next, and I will be putting that in my KU as soon as I freaking can. And that is Luxuria by Colette Rhodes. So I gave it 4 stars, and I almost want to put it in genre-defining smut. No, it goes in the good stuff, because it's like, it's on that line though. It really is. I didn't love it as much as I did A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, but Luxuria was so unique and interesting. It was a type of like demon or monster that I've never encountered before in this genre or in the paranormal romance genre. Young woman of like hunters who are supposed to fight and hunt down demons has always been like a little intrigued, a little fascinated, and so she actually gets kicked out of her family unit and like this group secret society, until they're like, hey, we actually need to broker peace with them, and we're gonna do it through marriage, so if you could like do that, you seem like you would be okay, yeah? And she's just like, heck yes, let me live out my fantasy. It features like one of the only times that the miscommunication trope has been okay in my books, because she's like super stoked to be there. So this type of demon usually smells fear as like a really appetizing scent, and so he smells her and is like, oh great, she's terrified of me, this is awesome. Except she's not terrified at all. There was a great miscommunication moment where she finally is like, you think I'm afraid of you? sequence of events is what almost pushes it up into genre-defining smut, because it was such a good use of that trope that I normally hate, which is miscommunication trope. So that's kind of where I'm stacking up. There was only one book that hit like absolute genre-defining levels for me, and that's Lady of Rooksgrave Manor, in part because I think it was kind of a little lightweight in this genre. I don't mind this trope, this niche category. I actually, turned out, I kind of enjoy it. I want to try Tiffany Roberts. I want to try, I think it's Naomi Lucas. I want to explore more of Lillian Lark. I want to keep going with Colette Rhodes. Kathryn Moon became one of my favorite authors of 2022 during this process. Like I'm diving deep into her back catalog. I've also seen some recommendations from you in that original video, but I did not get to them for Regina Abel's series, like the I Married a Lizard Man, I Married a Naga, like those came highly recommended by you all, so I would be willing to try those out. And then I had a new subscriber, Lilith, recommend me a book that I had never heard of called Secunda by Joanne Kwan. Peep the cover. The cover is really interesting. The reviews on Amazon are actually intriguing. There's other stuff in this genre that I still want to check out, so it ended up being more of a net win for me than I ever would have thought. So I think the majority of these books did fall into those top 3 tiers. So at bare minimum, for the majority of these, I was entertained. And only a few of them pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I have very specific reasons for why that was. Like, there were elements of the execution that were just not my kink, and that's okay. So hopefully me talking through my own personal feelings about all of these was super helpful. I should also say that with all of these, we're hitting a minimum of 3 peppers on the spice scale. I think the least spicy thing I read was the Kresley Cole book, and I would still rate that at like a 3.5 pepper on my personal pepper scale for like spiciness. Everything else was like a 4 or a 5 in spiciness because they were all erotic romances. The Kresley Cole book is the only one that I think falls into like traditionally published romance category. Tread lightly or stomp heavily here, depending on your interests. This was my exploration of monster size kink, or monster size difference, and it was way more fun than I gave it credit for. So I will be doing another version of this, so keep an eye out in that video in the coming weeks. I do have one other prompt from Stephanie, who initially kicked off this series, so I'm going to keep going with hers. I remember at least one of you left me a suggestion in my original video as well. So if you would like to leave me more suggestions for this subgenre category, this romance roundtable that we've got going here, leave that in the comments down below, and we'll see where it takes us. This has been an adventure for me, and I was happy to have taken it. I learned a lot about myself. It happens. So thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!